This video is an introduction to the study of anatomy and physiology, specifically human anatomy and physiology. The two words are similar in some ways, but also very different. Anatomy itself is the study of body parts, and it can be any body part from any animal, but we're going to focus on the human animal. And sometimes you might also hear anatomy referred to as morphology. That's a Greek term that combines two words, morph, which means form or shape, and ology, which always means the study of. So anatomy is the study of how body parts are shaped or how they are built. The physiology part of this study is how those parts do their jobs. That's called function. So anatomy and physiology is really the relationship between how the shape of a body part helps it to do a particular job. And we know in all of science that the way something is built has a very important part in how that same something does its job. So the relationship between structure and function is very important, and we'll spend the entire year looking at how those two things come together to form the amazing machine that is the human body. Most of the terms that you'll learn this year are either derived from Greek or from Latin, and we'll spend lots of time talking about their parts so that you can help to build an understanding of words and what they mean. So, what determines whether or not something is living? Hopefully from when you studied biology, you know that there are a few basic characteristics that all living things have in common. The first is cells. So you see down here a picture of some human body cells, but every living thing has some type of cell. The other characteristics of life include growth, so going from, say, a little seed to a big gigantic tree, or a little bitty baby to a big gigantic Shaquille O'Neal, something like that. All living things, humans included, have the ability to reproduce. That means that they can make more little versions of themselves. Some of the things that we will study in more detail is how human beings use food for gaining energy and then using that energy to grow or to reproduce or to perform certain activities or actions. All living things, and humans are an example of this, include the ability to use cellular respiration. That means that we take food in and we rearrange the parts that build up that food, and we use it to make new body parts. We use it as fuel for our activities. We use it in a variety of ways. While the word respiration sounds like how humans breathe, that's also called respiration. Cellular respiration and breathing are not the same thing. Those are two different processes. The final two characteristics of life are really connected with one another. The first one is the maintenance of homeostasis, which means same equilibrium, or keeping the body in a balanced and predictable state. The way that we do this, the way that we keep our bodies in balance, is through a variety of chemical reactions, which are called metabolism. So we use food, we create energy, we breathe, we grow. All of those things involve metabolism. In order to stay alive, which is what maintenance means, in order to maintain or keep ourselves alive, there are some requirements that all organisms have. That means there are some things they must have. So humans, along with most of the living things on this earth, need water. We use water for most every activity that happens in the body. Whenever a cell does any kind of work, when it grows or it reproduces, or it allows you to jump or sing or text or whatever, those reactions are happening in water. Water is kind of their bath. And water helps our body to stay healthy. It helps keep our temperature balanced. Basically, without water, we can't survive. Humans would die without water after about 3 days. You can go more than a month without food of any kind, but you can't go more than 3 days without water. So food helps to give your body energy and helps to provide smaller little building blocks for the creation of hair and nails and protein and all of those kind of body part building blocks. We use oxygen. Oxygen and food together allow for your body to create energy and to function in any capacity. We get oxygen from the air, and we get water from both our food and from our drinks. The two things that you may not think about as requirements of humans are heat and pressure. So heat, both heat that is coming from the outside, like the sun, right? We need a certain amount of sun energy in order to produce the food that we eat, in order to keep the temperature in our environment steady. But we also need heat that the body itself creates, and we need to keep that heat in a very narrow range. Usually our bodies like to be at about 37 degrees Celsius or about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. And then finally, pressure. There's pressure all around us, but mostly the pressure that we're dealing with at any given time is the pressure of how much air is above the earth wherever we are standing. We need a certain amount of air pressure to keep us attached to our planet so we don't fly off into space. But then we also need to be careful that we are not under too much pressure at any given time. So I've just told you that all of those preceding characteristics are necessary for us to stay alive. So again, that's this idea called homeostasis, where we want things to be in balance. We want the right amount of water, we want the right amount of oxygen, etc. So our bodies are built basically to monitor our internal and external environments all the time. So this keeps us in a state of homeostasis. The way that our body does that is we have receptors, which are usually very specialized cells that are found within the body that monitor and measure things like temperature, things like oxygen levels, things like blood pressure. All of those kinds of details are monitored by receptors. The receptors take a measurement and then they compare it to your norm, which is called the set point. The body has a very specific level at which it wants every single characteristic to be kept. And so the receptors compare. Here's the measurement of, let's say, temperature. It compares to the set point, which should be about 37 degrees Celsius. And if that measurement is not near 37 degrees Celsius, then effectors, specialized reactions in the body happen to adjust and get you back to that set point. So keeping with our temperature example, let's say that our receptors detect a value of 40 degrees Celsius inside the body. That's what happens when you have a fever. So the body is now too hot, and the receptors detect this measure of 40. They compare it to the set point, say, nope, that is too hot. Then the brain says, okay, it's time for a response. So the effectors begin to respond to the high temperature by doing a few things. Let's say the first thing that happens is the brain tells the body to begin to sweat. So you produce sweat on the skin, that sweat evaporates, and eventually the body temperature lowers, let's say, to 38 degrees Celsius. So now the receptors can measure that and they say, oh, okay, 38 is quite close to 37, which is where we want to be. So we can turn off the action of the effectors. As soon as we get within this normal range, all of the effector activity tends to slow down, and now the body just goes back into monitoring for normal readings. This entire system is an example of a very specific action by the body called negative feedback. That means when the body detects that something is off balance, 40 degrees, it begins activities to reverse that change or to bring it back to normal. So it does activity that negatively or oppositely changes whatever the problem is. So if the problem is that our temperature is too high, then the body begins to create activities that will bring it back down, which is the opposite of the problem. And that's why it's called a negative feedback system. We have another type of feedback that is much less common, but it's called positive feedback, because what happens is when the body detects a problem, so let's say in this example, this little girl has fallen and now she has split her skin open. So the skin's supposed to be nice and closed like this, but she has gotten in some kind of accident, and so now there's a big hole in her skin. And so blood is pouring out, right? And the body's like, well, that's a problem. So what it does is these little cells that are carried in the blood say, holy cow, now we're out in the environment. That's not right. So that information is detected by receptors. Receptors communicate it to the brain. There is blood outside of the body where it's not supposed to be. And so that's a change from the set point. And so the brain causes action of the effectors, which means it actually increases blood flow. So now all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of bleeding happening here, which doesn't seem right? If you think about it, why would the body make there be more bleeding? Well, the reason for that is carried in all this blood are these little cells that can clog up this opening and create a scab. So what the body actually did was it increased the problem for a minute as an opportunity to fix the problem. So this is a positive feedback system. It actually made the problem worse for a very small period of time in order to stop the problem altogether. That is going to wrap up our first look at anatomy and physiology and kind of the basics of the body, the human body, and how it functions. So use these questions, please, and write a summary. Your summary should be about 4 to 6 sentences. Try to write from memory whatever you can think of to answer each one of these questions, and then bring in 2 of your own questions. So those can be things that are curiosity, maybe something in this set of notes triggered a question you might have, anything that didn't make sense or you would like more information on. Write those questions in the question column on your notes and we will talk about them in class. Thank you.